This right here is a political compass. People say that just by answering a couple questions, it'll automatically know what your political beliefs are. Pretty cool, right? There's just one problem. It's wrong. I'm FT, and for the past 6 years, I have made it my mission to make a political test that doesn't suck. But why make one of my own when there's already so many out there? What's so wrong with every other one? Many people only need a couple months to finish theirs, so why did mine take 6 years? Well, before we answer any of that, let's take a step back. What's wrong with the political tests that already exist? What even is a political test? A political test is an online tool people use to figure out what they are politically. Every political test relies on what is known as a political model, a framework whereby one can define, categorize, and talk about political beliefs. Typically, when we talk about politics, we tend to sort things into terms of left and right. Left and right are relative terms. What might have been left-wing 100 years ago might not be the case today. What a Russian might consider to be a right-wing position is a lot different from what an American would consider to be a right-wing position. By confining your thinking to just left and right, you're letting whichever parties are active in your society set the limits about how you think about politics. That's all well and good if we just want to have a way to describe the kinds of politics our politicians practice. But what if we want to go beyond that? What if we want to leave the door open to new ideas? This is where the political compass comes in. The political compass is a system which tries to show the nuance in politics by redefining the spectrum. Instead of one axis, how much do you support this faction as opposed to this faction? The compass opens up the door to thinking along multiple dimensions. So instead of a line, one can think about the political compass as a grid of sorts. Where you end up falling on this grid should, in theory, give you an idea of your principles. On this grid, one axis represents the question of authority. How big should the government be? And how much freedom should people have? On the other axis, you have the question of economics. How much do you support free markets and capitalism versus a socialized system? Or if you really want to simplify it, you could say the following. The authority axis measures how much you think the government should meddle in social issues, while the economic axis measures how much the government should meddle in economic issues. The compass works by first giving you a test. This test will assign you a score, depending on how you answer its questions. Each question starts by presenting you with a statement of sorts. You'll read the statement and then select to what extent you agree or disagree with it. These statements can be on any number of issues. Every time you answer, the test will process it and then bump your score up on its associated axis. Once you're done, it'll take your scores and combine them into a coordinate. Then that coordinate will put you into one of the 4 quadrants on the grid. Both your quadrant and your score, according to the political compass, is what defines you. Now, if you were to go online, you'll see this compass is everywhere. I've seen YouTubers post their test results to try and prove their leanings. I've joined Discord servers where people made me take this test before deciding whether or not to even let me in. I've even been in high school and college classrooms where they use the model to explain politics. But hold on, I just said the model was wrong. So what's going on here? Now, if you were to ask the YouTube search bar what's wrong, you might get some hits. But I really would not do that, okay? A lot of these videos suck, okay? They go on for way too long, wasting your time talking about random irrelevant garbage, and it's really clear nobody making any of these videos has any idea what they're talking about. Thankfully, I respect your time, so I'm not going to subject you to some kind of 40 gorillion hour long video essay. Because really, this topic does not need it. The problems with this test are pretty simple. Like, take for example, the fact that the questions and the results on this test just straight up do not line up at all. So if you were to go off of how the test defines itself, you'd probably expect the questions to be stuff like, hey, what kind of stuff should the government be doing? But that's not always the case. Sometimes you'll get absolutely insane questions like, do you believe in astrology? Excuse me, what? What does this have to do with anything? But yeah, no, apparently if you select yes, it ups your authoritarian score. Huh? What? Like, why? How is this remotely relevant to any serious political discussions real people are having? Forget the star signs. These questions might as well be astrology. Oh, you're just cherry picking. The other questions are more relevant. Fine. Let's draw another one from the bucket. This question asks you if you hold to eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And once again, if you answer yes, your authoritarian score will go up. At least we're kind of in the realm of politics now. But what does this have to do with the government? Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure the fascists would love this idea. But you know who else would love this idea? Gang members and doomsday preppers. And as we all know, gang members and doomsday preppers famously love authoritarian police states. There are so many of these questions that try to be about some kind of abstract moral principle, like should women prioritize homemaking, or is it okay to spank your kids? But these just do not map at all onto the compass, because the compass defines itself in terms of government policy. Maybe there's someone who believes those things, but they don't think the government should be the one to enforce it. Maybe that same person sees the government as getting in the way of spanking their kids. The idea that you can have a society where multiple authorities exist, all with their own competing interests, just does not occur to the people who made this test. Which really just brings us into an even deeper problem. These questions are trying to cover more ground than the chart even has space to make sense of. Really, when they're asking you questions about feminism, religion, or family, they're trying to gouge one's views on tradition. But tradition is not an axis. So what they do instead is they settle for cramming it into the authority axis and calling it a day. So what would happen if, let's say, we just got rid of all the irrelevant questions and just focused on the stuff that'll actually fit onto the compass? You know, stuff like, should rich people be taxed less? There's still another problem. None of these questions give you an idea of why someone supports something. And understanding that is kind of important when the whole point of the test is supposed to be to help you make sense of your own ideas. On the test, there's a question where it asks you whether or not countries should have any barriers between their trade. Now, you could oppose this because you believe in the free market and see said barriers as hindering that. But you could also oppose it not because you support the free market, but because you distrust corporations and believe these restrictions only serve to pick favorites among them. These are two wildly different reasons rooted into very different perspectives that just so happen to come to the same answer. And you know what? Credit to the YouTubers, because I have to ask this question too. What if you just reject the premise altogether? What if you believe commerce shouldn't exist, and neither should companies? There's people out there who think like this. But that possibility is never raised, because the compass is too preoccupied with pigeonholing people into one of those four quadrants, rather than actually exposing them to a possibility they might not have considered. Which, on that note, let's imagine a world where all the questions were perfectly selected, perfectly written, and perfectly scored. You get your results, and then what? Look at this thing. Look at it. What does this even tell you? It's just some numbers on a graph. Numbers which have absolutely no use or meaning outside of the graph. Like, you're just gonna be walking into Walmart with your dumb little graph on printer paper, handing out the copies. Be for real. Like, who on earth would be dumb enough to make this their entire identity? Okay, all of that I just discussed, that's all pretty common knowledge by now. The political compass is such a punchline on the internet nowadays that even this guy can take shots at it. All the cool political extremists know that 2 axes is too few, and what the compass really needs is more representation for unhinged beliefs. This is where the PolComp competitors come in. The political compass might be the most famous test, but it is not the only one. Okay, so fine. 2 dimensions aren't enough, right? Try 8 values, the literal 4D political test. It asks you a series of questions, scores those questions, and then gives you a score along 4 axes. But look, the 4D just wasn't enough for some people. That's where the 9 axes test comes in. It's 9-dimensional. Now, before you get too excited, according to this guy, the 9 axes test has some errors and flaws that really need to be fixed. So he took to fixing them in his own test. 12 axes. How many axes of politics are you on right now? Like maybe 9 or 12 right now, my dude. You are like little baby. Watch this. Okay. I'll stop. Left values, Sapley values, the Prism quiz, 10 groups, hate values. Okay, look. Point is, are you starting to see the pattern here? None of these tests are actually meaningfully changing anything. They all use the same scoring system, same style of questions, and are oftentimes even working off of the same code base. A lot of these test makers will just tack on more questions, more answers, more results, because they assume the problem with the political compass is just one of representation. That if they can just stretch out its scope to cover every ideology and every possibility, then it'll work. Like, look, I have my problems with the political compass test, but at least it takes only like 10 minutes to complete. Some of these tests are so stuffed with questions and axes that I had to spend over 40 minutes running through each of them. That's insane. And once you do finish, instead of providing you with a quadrant or score, these tests will expect you to screenshot and share the full list of percentages along each axis. Sometimes these tests will even take your scores and try to map the numbers to a name of an actual ideology. But even then, that can come out kind of weird. Like, there's some results in here like autocracy or ultra-capitalism. Like, how are these actual ideologies? Autocracy is an adjective. It's not an actual system of thought. It's like these tests decide on the scale first and then just make up names to fit the spots on the graph. So why not just instead start by figuring out what ideologies do exist and then just start working backwards from there? You'd think by doing that, you'd be more anchored in actual, real world terms. They're so focused on constructing their own systems, their own axes, that they just end up spitting out stuff that has no meaning or use outside of the test itself. If there's any takeaway you get from this video, it's that none of these tests have much real educational value. They don't push you to read, learn, or explore more about politics. It might as well just be a BuzzFeed personality quiz. And look, these things can be fun. We can treat them as a fun thing to not take seriously, and that's fine. But that's not how they're presented. The political compass calls itself an educational tool. Half of these tests claim to be fixing the problems. Like, is this really just going to be the gold standard that we come to expect? 2018. 2018 was the year I started this project of trying to make an actually good political test. Obviously, the internet has changed a lot since then, and so has the landscape of political tests and how people see them. But even back then, I got a lot of pushback from people. Not people who were fans of these tests, but people who thought that trying to make a good political test is completely impossible. That politics is way too complex to reduce down to any scale, model, or system. So if you're trying, you're wasting your time. I remember when I was in the very early stages, just planning and sketching, I shared what I had to some friends, and one of them went and posted it to Reddit to make fun of. From what I remember, none of the commenters actually addressed the model itself, but mostly just went on about the impossibility of the task at hand. Looking back, I think it's undeniable to say that there's a bit of an air of cringe online surrounding these tests. One so strong that it can make people resistant to the idea of it being workable at all. That all the failed attempts to make one so far just prove the entire thing is a lost cause. But I don't think that's the case. For one, most of these tests are pretty similar. They reuse the same design, work off the same assumptions, and very few actually try to question the more fundamental aspects of how the political compass was designed. This means that there's still plenty of room to innovate. Secondly, I think it's worth remembering what the point of a model even is. The point of a model isn't to provide a 100% fully accurate, ontologically perfect representation of a thing. It's to provide a useful representation. As long as whatever the person is getting out of the model educates them and steers them in a productive direction, it's not entirely a wasted cause. But on that note, is politics really so inscrutable that it defies any sort of logic? Ideas branch off and take inspiration from previous ideas all the time. People are still responding to the same events, issues, and phenomena within society, even where they disagree. Beliefs aren't random. They emerge out of alliances, possibilities, and traditions. All of these have some level of structure to them. It's just that the nuances of this structure can often be lost on the people who try to map them out. So then, what would happen if you actually took the time to sit and break things down to their most essential components? That instead of taking the shortcut and trying to just pepper on more questions or scores, you instead set your sights on building from the ground up, even if it means it'll take a lot more effort on your end. What if, when making a political test, you started from zero? Well, that's what I did. I had an idea. I didn't fully know where this idea would take me, but I knew one thing. There was promise here. There was uncharted territory here. And if I really put my nose to the grindstone to make this as good as I possibly could, there was a chance I could prove them wrong. And now, 6 years later, I have a finished test. Okay, gamers, today we're going to be playing soil values. I got the soil values right here. I got the soil right here. And I got the test right here. So we're going to take the soil test. And we're going to be speedrunning it, actually. So I'm going to test my soil. Yes. It feels dry. It looks pretty dry to me. It has a yellowish color. No, it doesn't. Disagree. When touching it, it feels quite sticky. Doesn't seem very sticky to me. The material feels kind of smooth. Yeah, I'd say so. Crunchy sound is made when stepping on the material. No. No. Tiny powder or particles fall down when I pick it up. No. Agree. No. Agree. No. 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 Yes. I think so. If I were to use a hammer on it. No. I don't know about that one.